Today, I have a bit of a confession to make. I really love the Gundam card game, but you might be wondering, then why haven't I covered it in a while on this channel? And honestly, for covering card games as long as I have, it's been really nice to just take a step back, not follow every single meta list, and keep up to date with every little piece of news, and just go to my locals and enjoy it and get to see the meta evolve in front of me in real time. And as part of that, of course, I want to do this video where we're going to talk about the month one of the Gundam card game, the kind of three pillars that we've seen so far, as well as give my thoughts on the game overall. So this will likely be just a one or two video series that I do per set with Gundam. As more sets come out, maybe I'll do an unboxing if I get product in time, what have you. But this, for me, leading back to the confession part, is something that is going to be more of a guilty pleasure that I can just focus on offline and enjoy. Now, that said, you might have also caught the news that I will be casting the Pro Play Games event with none other than Eggman. And after working kind of side by side on other games, it's really cool to finally cast a game together. But I am very invested at a personal level in the Gundam card game. So again, there are other things that I want to focus on. Both Aspira and Eggman are doing a wonderful job covering the game and like every single meta event that's happening. So I will likely just speak to larger recaps. And if I get back to the market video, surprising, Gundam has been doing insanely well from a TCG player sales standpoint. So very curious to see where that falls in line. But if you're new to Gundam or just very curious to hear my thoughts on the meta, then again, that's exactly what we're going to dive in today. So without further ado, let's talk about it. So here is the overall breakdown of the month one meta by Eggman Events. Again, his website, I just went through, categorized everything, and I did cheat a little bit, which I am going to talk about here shortly. But largely, we are seeing three different decks pop up in the meta, or I should say three different style of decks, with a aggro variant, a control variant, and a more, mid-range value variant. And to be fair, this is actually quite common for what we see in trading card games, right? Aggro decks are supposed to be fast enough where they can beat up on the control decks. The more mid-range value or ping removal style of decks usually beat up on the aggro decks because you're a little bit lower to the ground. And then, of course, when you have the control versus mid-range style of value, the control deck just goes a little bit later into the game and really has that more powerful top end that they're finishing the game with. Now, in this case, in terms of actual end game finishers, I think Wing Zero just being a bigger body and also removing a lot of things on the board kind of takes the cake here over maybe say the Unicorn deck or the blue-white blockers that has popped up. But overall, I think that we still have some interesting dynamic between the early, mid, and late game parts of the Gundam card game meta that are starting to evolve. And then notably here, yes, there was three decks that either fall outside of these categories, one of them being Academy Aggro, which I will talk about shortly in this video as well, because again, we're going to have 5 total deck lists to go over. But again, at a highest level, we have what I'm just calling blue-white blockers. Now, there have been some white-red variants as well that are just largely the same, but it does play into that gum up the board, making sure that aggro really can't interact with it, and having more control late-game pieces. We have the more combo or just all-in, get to your late-game bomb that is Wing Zero, making up the second most played archetype. And then blue-green. So there's both the Earth Federation variation as well as the fanfic version that, if you know, the combo that saved Gundam quite literally as a franchise. But these both have the gun cannon kind of taking the spotlight as what you're pairing with Amuro. So keeping that as like the signature card, as it were. And then lastly is the Kistria, the blue-red ping deck, which really goes the distance with Merida. So this is very interesting that we see, a pretty good spread, all things considered, for a Bandai set one. Again, I haven't been following as closely with like all the beta events that were happening up into, shout out to Eagle, also doing another series of webcam events. I really just want to experience the meta for myself at the local level and digest it more naturally than just going over, before obviously this video, going over every single list with a fine-tooth comb, what have you. Now, the one thing that is going to stick out, and again, for maybe those who are newer, I'm trying to make this as, backwards looking friendly as possible for maybe people who are jumping into the game later, or just as a overall snapshot of the meta in the future, is you'll notice with Gundam, you have the option to build a deck with 2 colors. And shocking or not shocking, we have to talk about the elephant in the room, is that blue and white makes up the vast majority of it. And that's not just because we do see the most played deck at the time of this recording is blue-white blockers. Now, small caveat that I have to add here is, of course, as I was recording and editing this, Eggman actually just put up a bunch more results. But spoiler, they all fall in line more or less with this pie chart. Blue-red ping does take up a little bit more, and the visualization shifts a little bit, but fundamentally nothing is really changed from where things are within the first month. I will note is that it does seem like aggro overall is on the rise, so I would expect more of the left-hand side of this chart to increase, where the right hand is going to start to decrease in its share. But overall, again, we'll see how things lead up into the October regional. But back to the color discussion, right? Blue and white just is so strong in what it offers. Green, again, here just being both a combination of the aggro deck and the Wing Zero deck, but truly red is falling off. And you might ask yourself, well, what is the key difference or the biggest part of why red has such a lower share? And what we need to talk about is the actual supporting cards that make up each of these colors. And for the sake of this, I left green out because, again, that falls into 2 very different categories of 2 different style of decks that just do what they want to do. And I also want to be upfront, keeping in mind is that it is the units that actually win the game, right? You do need to attack your opponent with that last, destroy their base, destroy their shield, swing through for that last hit, and finally win with a unit. However, what's really important to acknowledge then is, well, what is the supporting cast around it? Everyone is going to have a unit and a pilot combination that you could effectively do any combination for, right? You love 2 different unit cards, you grab the respective pilots, shove that together in a deck, and then what are you ultimately left with? Well, it's going to be the command cards that you have to flesh out the rest of your deck with. And as we've seen, at least early on in the meta, there are some decks that are going 46 cards of one color and then a literal 4 of Overflowing Affection and Show of Resolve. And that's it, right? These cards are so strong from a card filtering or card selection ability that they are always worth trying to find room for if you absolutely can without obviously breaking the game rules themselves. So Show of Resolve and Overflowing Affection really have taken the spotlight within the set 1 meta. And shocker, I'm really not expecting this to change anytime soon. Even within set 2, we're obviously going to get purple, or I guess slightly before we'll get IBO. But that also leads into a more positive point I'll say about red here shortly. But when we look at red, one of the best things that we have is going to be Battle of Aces, but it does have the requirements of having a damage unit. Now, we do have another command card that allows us to get that more ping value, but so often we have to find ways that we're 2 for 1-ing ourselves, that we're just getting behind or barely staying neutral if we're hitting a unit that is linked up or paired up, what have you, right? So it does feel a little bit bad in that regard, where on the other side of it, we do have Kashtaria, which again is a unit that you can attack with, which is really nice, but it really leans in on that all-in ping style of package. And then Marita just being a good pilot for a variety of reasons, not just because it can go blue or red for the pairing, but just giving you more of that damage-based effect. So one thing I will say is that probably Bandai was a little bit hesitant on how strong they made the ping-based removal. I, of course, just have to mention things like Shadowverse Evolve because there are some very direct comparisons to where Shadowverse Evolve is at and how this game plays out itself. But we do have much stronger ping or removal based options in Shadowverse compared to what we have in Gundam today. Now, again, there are some things to consider like units and pilot combinations versus if you evolve something in Shadowverse Evolve where you're still spending the 2 cards and how good the removal is when you can 2 for 1 something. However, I do find that these felt a little bit lacking in their overall strength compared to the value that you're getting just out of naturally playing, again, blue or white as even the secondary color. Now, again, there is a blue-red list that we're going to be talking about, but also probably the other reason why, and kind of the elephant in the room, as it were, is that, well, we just got a couple spoilers regarding IBO, and it is a self-ping style of deck, much like Abyss in Shadowverse Evolve, spoiler, where it is going to be a self-damage effect, get some value, and progress your board that way. Well, in that case, then Battle of Aces becomes just an insane removal option. But again, that does leave itself to be confirmed or see how well it actually plays out in October. And well, we're 2 months away from when that's actually going to be relevant. So it does have a little bit of a, dampening party as it were today, but I do think that if we see a good spotlight for IBO, and it's just popular, so I'm sure people will play it anyways, but then I could see red kind of coming to the front and being a little bit better in the meta than it currently is. Now, I will say I didn't grab a list for this video, but I really do like the all-in Zaft package that I've been seeing pop up, at least on Japanese Twitter. And again, if you know me from previous games, I follow a ton of Japanese shops or players, and honestly, I see more of the Japan meta than I do of the Western meta comparatively, unless I'm literally going on Eggman's website. So I might be a little biased, but Zaft seems pretty good, and I haven't really seen it pop up at all in the West. So for my locals this week, I'm actually building a variation of the deck, and that's what I'm going to go play to get my own opinions on it. But with all that out of the way, you probably just want to see some deck lists, so let's talk about it, right? Let's get into each of these individual style of archetypes, kind of what they do, what's the signature card at the top end, and how successful that they have been. Now, again, full credit to Eggman for all these lists. I've just grabbed various, 5-0 or 5-1 style lists, or 4-1 for the Academy, to show that they were, reasonable deck lists that you could pull from to jump into the game with. So, as I mentioned early on, blue-white blockers, again, having almost the full playset of both Overflowing Affection and Show of Resolve, just getting that extra card filtering and selection is so important for curving out your game. All things considered, Gundam is a very fair drawing style of game, unlike Digimon, where you're just going through your deck every single game, every color has a billion draw cards, what have you, right? This is more akin to more classic style of games like Magic, or even just, normal kind of card draw, as it were, in most card games we find today, that anytime you have abilities to draw extra cards, it is going to be quite strong, assuming that you can survive to play it. So Unicorn Gundam Destroy Mode is going to be kind of our top end signature piece here. There has been some other ones just in terms of like the Ailstrike Gundam, just giving you extra bounce and having a blocker is good as well. But the important part is when you're able to just play this effectively for free because you're using the other one for the effect, it allows you to catch back up in the game and has a decently sized body to it that allows you to have a very real threat on the board that your opponent has to deal with. And not to forget, Lynx himself gives +2/+2 and draws a card when you get linked as well. So you can see that there is a ton of card value in here of just making sure that you are seeing the key pieces when you need them for your deck. And then, of course, how are we stabilizing or getting to that point? Otherwise, again, I did mention the Ailstrike Gundam as a top end, or I should say more of a mid-game option, really, for being a good blocker and bouncing stuff. But if you've seen it, Gundam Lifrith is just... it's everywhere. It's a 2/4 blocker. It's basically the best stat line we could ask for. Maybe one of the best cards in the entire set for just how it helps stabilize against aggro. But overall, just a very solid card. And otherwise, finding a bunch of other units that are just 4/3s, which are either good, again, for attacking into an early EX space and breaking it, or having 4 attack is really important for trading into some of those paired units for the more aggressive strategies. So finding a couple units that have the 4/3 line is very, very strong. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't also then acknowledge is that Kira Yamato, with having the -2 AP on attack, just gives you so much board controlling ability that it really goes to shine of just this incremental advantage that you can get turn over turn and slowly close off your opponent before you finally just get to win the game and just swing out on a turn. So in this case, Lucas, shout to the 5-0. Moving on from there, we have Green White Wing. Again, spoiler, we have the blocker package that we're going to see quite often in white. But this is just the all-in, get some good ramp pieces with your Wing Gundam Bird mode, which allows you to get an extra EX resource. But for me, kind of the one that really does take a note of bringing this all together is always going to be Gundam's Death Scythe. Getting the first strike, getting to rest a EX resource, or excuse me, a regular resource as you play them to ramp up is really, really nice. So between the EX resource that you're getting from the Wing Gundam Bird mode, as well as the regular rested resource from Gundam Death Scythe, you are able to ramp up quite quickly into that massive Wing Gundam Zero that has the deployability to clear the board. So this is so strong against the aggro strategies that you're often going to be able to 2 to 3 to 4 for 1 them off the deploy. Now, keep in mind that this does require you to, of course, then close out the game, so that can be a little bit difficult if you miss a ramp piece or you don't hit your early blockers. There, of course, will be some games that you just don't see the right pieces and fall in your face, and well, that's the price we play for playing some of the more greedy aggro decks. However, with this variation and having 8 copies of the early blocker cards, as well as Wing Gundam into Hero Yui just being a good removal threat that your opponent has to deal with and then effectively remove 2 of their cards because it's going to be a massive stat body. That's also fine, but overall, you do want to try to save it for either the level 6 or level 8 pairing with the Wing Gundam or Wing Gundam Zero to either get the breach, have an even bigger body, or again, just making sure that you're swinging for game when you really need it. So if you love more ramp style of decks and just going tall and having those big bodies slammed on the board, as well as, let's face it, Gundam Death Scythe is one of the coolest ones out of set 1, then this is definitely a deck list to check out. Now, here is where I cheated a little bit. As I mentioned, I am using Gun Cannon because there is this version of blue-green aggro, which after playing this, I do think it is the better version personally. And then you also have the Earth Federation variation, which is, you don't play Char in that case, but it is still very low to the ground, extremely aggressive, just vomit a bunch of cards on the board and swing, right? Once you use like the Zaku 2 that gets the plus AP to break their EX base, if they don't have an immediate base to follow up with, all these 1 damage and 2 damage units are just fine, right? You just want to turn things sideways and swing. I know a lot of people have called this either rookie rush or, something of that nature of just, oh, Bandai made aggro too strong again. And well, I'd argue that, yes, we do actually have the big checkmate in the format with the blockers list, or just having more decks kind of lean their variations to be more defensive to counter this. It does kind of feel bad that we don't have sideboards where I really think Gundam would benefit, because so often we see these lists that can either tune for either a lower to the ground, pray you don't run into the ramp style of decks because you're trying to target aggro, or you build a more late game style of deck because you're trying to target the wing deck, but then you lose out onto aggro, right? So a sideboard would fix a lot of these issues, but unfortunately, because it is best of 1, you kind of just have to hope that you're finding the right meta at the right time to attack with the changes that you make in your list. So again, as I mentioned, the key part of this is understanding that the Gun Cannon and Amuro, and then any of the Char Zakus, right? And Char go together to give you that last punch of damage that you really, really need. And what's also worth noting, this version is a little bit different because it has the white base instead of the other one that gives you a 3/1 token, but we do have other ways to get extra units or extra tokens on the board to be aggressive as well. So definitely something to keep in mind if you haven't seen this at your locals yet. It is a very strong, very fast, very aggressive style of deck that just does wonders if they find the right pairings at the right time. And what was really interesting that I felt like I just had to call out in today's video is the Academy aggro style of deck, as it's been called, because, spoiler, there are a lot of things in here that care about either the Academy trait or just Soletta Mercury doing Soletta Mercury things, but this is a very interesting point for me personally in the Gundam card game of where things are going to go in the future. One of the more difficult things to balance, in my opinion, is going to be, when are we getting another Hero Yui, right? This is something that, as we get additional pilots, whatever they link with is going to just get stronger, as haste or giving the ability to attack right away is very, very strong in the Gundam card game. Now, as you may have followed me on Twitter if I post elsewhere, what I forgot to say earlier is that I also love Arsenal Base, and I've been watching how they balance this game in Japan. And for the most obvious example I could give with G-Quux around the corner is that Char would no longer just be Char Ansible, right? It'd be Char Ansible in parentheses G-Quux. And so that's how they would designate it as 2 different pilots that don't get the link for each of the respective, universes, as it were. And so I would expect more of that in the future. But the Academy trait deck, as we're talking about here, is again just being more aggressive and just having everything under the sun linking up with whatever you want. So while it's not as low to the ground as the blue-green style of deck, this is definitely one that will get you multiple attacks in a game where you're having that magical link pairing and just getting to swing out. So this is another one that's kind of on my radar for a little bit of extra tweaking and which way I might want to build this, but I'd be very curious to see if the Academy version can hold up as more people are refining their deck lists and whatnot. But overall, again, this is leading to the aggro pillar, but still a deck list that I want to call out. 1, for the commentary around how we balance pilots, but also 2, something to consider is definitely make sure you're looking for not only pilot-based links, but also trait-based links, as that will likely be a point that the game expands on in the near future. And of course, bringing it back to the blue, red, pink style of deck, as I mentioned, or again, Marita just being able to go into both of your top end cards. This is all about getting more value off of pinging extra units and getting that extra damage. And I've seen quite a few different variations of this deck list and either how low to the ground they are or just how much higher they go, or they have more command cards to get extra ping damage that way. But in short, having the Kshatriya into the Marita Cruise allows you to get multiple ping damage onto the board, where turn after turn, especially if your opponent tried to attack into your early units to try to get the board control, well, then just pairing and attacking with the Kshatriya is going to do a lot of good work, right? And then we also have things like the starter deck Shinaju that gets you extra damage that way, as I've seen make an appearance in this list with full frontal. But for right now, we just have the Banshee and the Kshatriya here being the key pairing that we want to use. And again, getting first strike off of the other Unicorn Gundam O2 Banshee Destroy mode is really strong for just controlling the board as a option. And again, when you're able to pair that up and you're able to go into 7 attack first strike, it's going to kill whatever you want at that point, bar a, wing 0 that is paired up with Hero Yui, but generally you found another way to do a ping damage to it anyway, so it's still going to clear it. So this one definitely leans itself more towards a, mid-range ping style of deck to kind of clear the way, with a lot more deck variation control that you can really lean in with. So if you're someone who wants to do a bit more deck building and a bit more deck expression in terms of how you can pull these decks together, I would very, very, very strongly recommend checking out Blue Red Ping because I do think it is well positioned, assuming you know how to build it for your meta. And with that, that is our quick recap of the month 1 meta in Gundam Card Game. What are your thoughts on how your locals are going? Oh, the other thing I'll mention is we had 17 people at my locals last week, which is insane for a new card game that's not One Piece. I have been blown away by just the local excitement for this game that, again, someone who grew up with Wing and Gundam was not popular in the States. Like, let's be very honest, right? Until Wits from Mercury, where we saw a little bit of the revival, Gundam just hasn't been the most popular. Now, obviously, like Gunpla and all that sells, but the anime definitely was a bit lacking. Now we've seen this kind of second resurgence and going from Witch into G-Quex, which a lot of people really like G-Quex. It's been really nice. So again, let me know how your locals have been, and also what is your favorite deck from the month 1 meta? Let me know in the comments down below. So again, as I mentioned up front, the Gundam videos is definitely more of a guilty pleasure that I'm enjoying offline. Again, I will be casting some events, and I am very actively engaging this offline, but in returns to always staying on top of the meta and always having to do a video, it's just really nice to have a card game for me for once for the end of the day. So I will sprinkle in some Gundam videos from time to time, like this one where we go into more of a monthly meta analysis. But if there are other types of videos you want to see, I guess let me know in the comments down below. But until next time, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.